Hi Rockstars, I hope you're all well. I said in the last video about living on a narrowboat, and I figured I should qualify that a bit and tell you a bit more about how that happened. So the guy I was with before my ex-husband also lived on boats, and he was the one who got me into living on boats. Before then I'd had the idea and just gone, no, this is just a terrible idea, you know, you've got no space, it's really cramped, it's really narrow, you know, what do you do when you go to the loo? How does that all work? You know, how do you plug something into a plug and switch it on and expect the thing to work and that kind of thing. So I just never thought that I would live on a boat ever. And then I got together with the previous boyfriend and he lived on boats and I loved it. I really loved visiting him and spending time on his boat. It was absolutely great fun. So when my ex-husband and I decided that we wanted to buy a home together, living on a boat was really the obvious choice because we couldn't afford to buy a real house. We looked all over the place. There's a few specialist websites where people sell their boats. We thought about buying a brand new one and getting it all made to our spec, but we couldn't really afford that. So we ended up buying secondhand a 30-odd-year-old boat by the name of Helena. And we bought her in the marina at Harlow. The thing about Harlow is that it's about 60 miles probably from there to Cambridge by road, and it's 250 miles from there to Cambridge by river. So being crazy as we were and not wanting to pay for our lorry to pick the boat out of the water, put it on the back and then take it to its new home, we decided that we were going to move the boat on the water the whole way. So it took us about 2.5 weeks. We went down the Stort to the River Lee and then down from the River Lee to London. From there we picked up the Regent's Canal and we navigated across London through the Regent's Canal, through Camden Town, which was really nice, all the way out to the west end of London. And then we picked up the Grand Union Canal. We went all the way up the Grand Union Canal to Northampton. We went down a flight of 17 locks, which took the best part of the day, down onto the River Nene, also in Northampton. We then went from there on the River Nene to Peterborough. From Peterborough we went onto the middle level and went through all of the fens essentially. And there's a place in, I think it's in Wisbech, I always get this wrong, but I think it's in Wisbech, where there's basically, it's called Angle Corner and it is literally a 90-degree bend in a concrete drain, which is where the navigation goes. The boat that we bought was specifically narrow so that we could get through the locks at Northampton, but it was also specifically the length that it was because that was the longest that we could get through Angle Corner. And when we hit it, we did actually have to punt it very slowly around this corner until we got to this end, and then we could carry on going. And then we eventually got to the Denver Sluice, and then from there we went down the River Ouse, and then from there onto the River Cam, and then to Cambridge. We had a lot of really interesting experiences along the way. So getting the boat out of the marina in the first place was a nightmare because navigating a boat backwards just doesn't work, and she was nose first into her mooring. So we eventually managed to bribe somebody to come out and help us move the boat and get it out of the marina. We actually spent a bit of time living up in Bishop Stortford on April Island, so that's my old hometown, and I knew a few people who lived there. We spent some time there just kind of navigating up and down the Stort, getting used to navigating the boat and getting used to spending some time on it as well. When we set off, everything was fine, you know, the weather was pretty good. It was in July, it wasn't too bad until we got to Northampton. And then some kids threw bricks at us as we were navigating through Northampton itself. We had to avoid all the trolleys and all the also horrible, nasty things that were in the river. It was pretty awful. Oh, before that, in London, we actually did get a bike caught in our propeller. So we had to get somebody in a canoe to kind of help us get the bike out of the propeller. But anyway, Northampton, bricks, and then we got just past Northampton onto the River Nene and it started to rain. And it was very heavy rain and it rained for quite a long time. And the River Nene floods really, really easily when it rains. So then we were navigating in a flood. We nearly lost the boat over a weir at one of the locks. I've told you about Angle Corner. That was a bit stressful because I really didn't think we were going to get round at one point. And then the rest of it was pretty easy. When you get to Denver, you have to wait a little while. You have to book a passage through the Denver Sluice. It's not the sort of lock that you do yourself. It's a massive lock and somebody else has to do that for you. That was absolutely fine, and eventually we got through there, and then the cruise down the Ouse and onto the Cam was fairly easy. So then we lived on Midsummer Common for ages and ages, and that was really good fun. We did move up and down a little bit. When we got married, we actually went on a honeymoon on the boat, so we went up the other end of the River Ouse. I always say that I went to St Neots on my honeymoon, because that's basically how far we got before we had to turn around and come back again. We got the cats as well. We had 2 cats as kittens. We had Ziggy, who is here with me now, and we had Neve as well, but unfortunately Neve didn't like living on the boat and she didn't like living with Ziggy either, so she had to go and live somewhere else. Basically, I always thought that, you know, if we were on the boat we could always move if we didn't like where we were. And living in Cambridge on Midsummer Common can be quite stressful because there are rowers. They can't control their boats very well. They always end up crashing into you. They're pushing off your boat at like 6 o'clock in the morning and shouting at each other up and down the river at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it is quite a stressful, kind of not a very idyllic kind of place to live, really. So I always thought that we could kind of move somewhere a bit quieter, but unfortunately had to be as close to the pub as possible. So we lived on Midsummer Common. After I left him, I let him keep the boat because he was in a higher paying job than me. He could afford to pay for the debt on the boat, and also I had somewhere to go and he didn't. You know, I had people I could move in with, whereas he didn't have anybody. So I figured letting him keep his own home out of the divorce agreement and just kind of having a clean break from there was a good idea. Now, 6 months before I left him, I dried the bilge. So in a boat, you've got, on our boat anyway, you've got like an open back deck and you've got some deck boards which you stand on when you're navigating. Then underneath there's the engine and the batteries and all that sort of thing. My ex-husband ran the engine out of diesel and then didn't buy any more diesel or get anybody to come and help him kind of draw the diesel through to get the engine started again. And without the engine running, you couldn't run the pump which pumped any rainwater out of the boat that had come down through the deck boards into the engine bay. And he obviously didn't feel like going in with a hand pump like I had previously in order to remove the water that way. So 2 years to the day after I left him, the boat sank. And it actually made it onto the local newspaper. I'll put a picture up so you can see. It made it onto the front page of the local newspaper, which was incredibly embarrassing. But anyway, eventually he got it raised. I'm not quite sure how, but he sold it for a fraction of the value we bought it for. Yeah, unfortunately neither of us had the boat anymore, which is a bit of a shame because I kind of feel like I wish that I'd negotiated with him to keep the boat, and then it would have been mine and Devay's home, and that would have been really lovely, and we'd have looked after it and we'd have taken care of it and done it up and made it really nice inside as a really lovely home, but that didn't happen. So boat sank, got sold, and luckily the people who bought it renovated it. So about 2 or 3 years after it sank, I started to see it back on the River Cam again, which was really heartbreaking but lovely. You know, it was nice to know that it hadn't just been scrapped. So anyway, yeah, that's the story of my boat and how I lived on a boat for a little while. It was probably about 2 or 3 years, 2.5 years maybe, that I lived on it, and it was hard work. You know, and the first winter was really super cold because we only had a gas central heating system that was really expensive. You were running it off gas bottles, and you know, we were going through a gas bottle a week in the depths of the winter. But the second year we got a multi-fuel stove with a water jacket on it, and we plumbed that into the same heating system as the central heating. We'd have the central heating on the pilot so that the fire would keep the boat nice and warm most of the time, but as it died down the central heating would take over, and then we were never cold again. It was wonderful. It was really, really lovely. Lugging sacks of coal around was hard work, especially because it was me that was doing most of the lugging, but it was a lovely place to live, lovely way to live. I just wish that I'd kept the boat myself and it hadn't sunk. Anyway, I just thought I'd tell you about that little story, and I hope you guys are all well. I will see you all again very soon. Bye.